Hello and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, this is my space for exploring concepts of mental health and wellness and arts and creativity and how they connect to each other. So whether you are a doctor or a creative artist or you work in a grocery store, all humans are inherently creative beings. And how is that something we can foster and nourish, and how can it bring more light and color into our everyday lives? So today I'm breaking down this concept of creative thinking and how to embrace new perspectives. This is part of a little series I'm doing on habits of highly creative thinkers. And being open to new ideas is important for two main reasons. Firstly, it helps us develop this kind of mental elasticity, where we will be able to more quickly develop many possible solutions to a problem and then select the most promising one the most quickly. So it's an element of intelligence. Very brilliant people are good at thinking outside the box, coming up with new concepts. So developing this skill is something we can apply in our work and in our daily lives in whatever circumstances and challenges face us. It's very helpful and healthy to develop new ways of thinking. It's also very important for us in our social and emotional health. Being able to push our perspectives a little bit, to embrace a new way of thinking, helps us to be more empathetic. It helps us to understand other peoples and cultures, and it builds a healthier society overall when more people adopt this kind of flexible way of thinking. So it's good for us in many ways. Today I'm going to break down 5 broad concepts that we can apply to any different situation that will help us intentionally be a little more flexible and open-minded in our thinking. Okay, so the first and arguably most simple concept is to stay curious and keep asking questions. Many of us, once we reach a point in our lives where we're comfortable, we know how to navigate our work, we understand the society we live in, we can get by just fine. We no longer need to push ourselves and learn more. We can become very passive, and we naturally aren't learning as much as we used to. Part of why kids learn so much so quickly is because they have to. They must keep asking questions because they do not understand how anything works yet. There is a sense of urgency there. People will learn a language much more quickly if they're put in a circumstance where learning it is urgent than if they can do it passively, and this makes sense. So if you're learning out of a book in a classroom or off of an app on your phone, that's good, you'll get some basics, but if you throw yourself into the culture, you'll learn it so much faster because what are you going to eat for dinner? The thing you want or this other thing because you don't know how to speak the language? There's an urgency there. So if we can find ways to apply a little bit of urgency to learning new things in our lives, we'll pick them up much more quickly because we'll be more naturally interested. So most of us don't have this natural urgency in place, and so there are a couple of things we can do. The first is to put yourself into a circumstance where that will be there. A great way to do this is traveling. We don't know all the rules. So if you're open to that and you can be excited and enjoy the process, you will just learn a ton because you're naturally interested and engaged and you're trying to gather information so that you can get by and better relate to the people around you and understand the experience you're having. Expose yourself to a new skill or maybe to learning about a new profession or a new area of ideas that you haven't learned about yet. It's as simple as that. Think of something you're not already familiar with and just start learning about it. So maybe you want to pick up a book on the principles of Buddhist philosophy. Maybe you want to take a class on Portuguese cooking. We can learn about a new profession, and this is interesting because it might seem like a waste of time, but humans are brilliant at making connections. That is what we do naturally all the time, and it's the act of creativity. Creativity is coming up with new ideas and then connecting them in new ways. So we want to expose ourselves to as many new possible connections as possible. Look at professions you don't know anything about. That's an easy way to quickly learn a lot and a whole new perspective. Of course, we can expose ourselves to new cultures, and that's what goes hand in hand with the idea of travel. Another really important one that most of us skip over is the concept of being curious about people. And in every context, to add a little bit of curiosity about your coworkers, about the people in your family and the ones you know really, really well, and about strangers in the grocery store. A lot of bias and discrimination, or even simply just being a little bit closed off and missing out on opportunities, comes from assuming that we know everything about the people around us, or just writing them off and deciding we're not really interested. There is an ad for Sprite, I think, that I hate. that I will try and put in the comments if I can find it. But the concept is this. Some young guy comes up to the window, I think to buy a bus ticket, and the guy selling tickets starts telling him a story, like a personal story of his life. And this kid is like rolling his eyes and super irritated until he takes his Sprite and he opens it and like the fizzing sounds like it's going shh. And he like can't hear the guy anymore. And then, I don't know, cue some slogan for Sprite and how it helps you be a happy person who doesn't have to listen to boring stories. And this ad makes me so mad because the moral of the story is we will help you live your best life where you stay in your own bubble where you never have to listen to annoying people. It's so rude and so dumb. The character in this story just literally missed out on an opportunity to connect to a stranger who was telling him a story. That is the best way to connect to strangers. Whew. Okay, anyways. This highlights a principle that I obviously feel very strongly about, which is that if we stay open to people, not only will we learn more, we will become more empathetic, we will be kinder people, and we'll be open to life. Who knows what story that guy was going to tell him? Maybe it was funny. Maybe it had an interesting life lesson. Maybe he was going to, for some reason, offer him free tickets to a football game. You don't know. So we want to stay curious to people as well. For all of these reasons, I think a lot of us would be curious about people in another country because they're exotic and foreign and we are naturally curious about the way they live their lives, but we're not curious about our neighbors or the people in the grocery store, and that makes me sad. We need to stay interested in the people around us as well. They're the ones we can literally right away connect with today. Okay, so stay curious and keep asking questions. The next one is to deliberately try and change your perspective. The way I like to think of this is there something in this project or whatever you're working on that you can turn upside down or backwards? Maybe physically, literally, or metaphorically. Is there a way, whatever project or task you're struggling with, that you can just turn it on its head? Because it will give you an entirely different perspective. It's something we never do because it doesn't make logical sense. Anytime we're working on a project or we're doing something set in our lives, we know the rules, we know the parameters, we want to stay there because we have the highest odds of success. That's what we've learned from trial and error. So then we'll stop and we won't question it anymore. But once in a while, completely question it, and that's how you'll find new ideas. It's not saying you actually want to do the entire project with like the building upside down, but maybe when you flip it over, you'll be able to see new elements that you hadn't considered before. The same thing with approaching things backwards. What if you looked at the end of the project first? You said, okay, maybe we should start here. What would that do? What would that do to the workflow? Or maybe it's more of a metaphorical thing and there's a way to say, well, we're working on this project, here's the most important part, and then we have all these ancillary elements. What if we were to reverse that and make one of the ancillary parts the most important and everything revolved around that? Again, it's probably not what you're going to do in the end, but for unlocking your mind and looking at it in new ways, it's a really useful tool. And most of us aren't used to pushing our thinking like that. We get a little lazy. We kind of take things for granted. And if we can switch it around, it can really unlock doors. It can show us new connections. It can get things rolling a little bit. So is there a way you can take whatever you're thinking about and either turn it upside down or come at it backwards? The next one, related but not the same, is to invite an element of randomness. Is there some part of your life or a project you're working on that you can really open up and let some random elements come in and see what happens? A very simple example of this, it doesn't seem random, but technically it is when product developers open up their product for people to actually sample. It's not very random because the odds are really good that this pool of people is going to try what you're giving them and then give you an opinion about it. That's pretty predictable, but you do not know what they're going to say. The very simplest way to add a little bit of randomness is to ask for another opinion or in any way open your project up to other people because we can never control other people. If you want to go a little deeper in that route, ask a child what they think you should do because again, they don't have the same parameters, they don't know the rules, they will think outside the box for you. This is also what we're doing when we stop for a brainstorming session, is we're saying, here are the standard parameters, here's what I think will work, but we're like kind of stuck on this project. You put it all to the side and you say, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And you just write down every zany idea you can think of. You're really inviting an element of randomness, and then you can kind of sift through it, right? And decide what actually makes any sense to pursue. Another hands-on, very hands-on example of this would be if you're a songwriter. then you're working on this song and you've got the chord structure down and you've got the melody down, but you're stuck on this one part. Maybe you want to just let your hands kind of doodle around on the keys. Maybe you want to throw out the time signature and not worry about the beats that you're supposed to be keeping it in. Maybe you want to throw out the keys signature and just go anywhere on the keys you want. This is inviting randomness and seeing what sticks. So see if there's a way you can let in this element of randomness to some part of what you're working on. And it's another thing in life that's hard but very bold if we can push ourselves outside of our comfort zone in a way that we really don't know what's going to happen, to try something unpredictable, kind of like learning a new skill or traveling to a new place, or maybe getting to know a new group of people. Again, people you can never predict. All of this is a little bit scary, but it's inviting that element of randomness and you don't know what will happen. It's bringing in more creative possibilities. Then the fourth one is just to create something. Anytime we develop a habit of creativity deliberately, where we're actually making something from raw materials, we're making a new thing from raw materials, we're absolutely hugely exercising this muscle. Because anytime we're creating something, there is no set outcome. There are inherently less rules for success. So it forces us to just try a lot of new things and see what kind of works. And we have to be okay. This is so important. Anytime we're making anything or trying to be creative, we need to not judge the outcome really harshly. A lot of us are blocked because we don't want to look stupid and we don't want to get it wrong. Again, that's part of why kids are so naturally creative. They don't know the rules, so they're not as worried about getting it wrong. We know the rules and we kind of don't want to break them. But on your own, in your free time, don't worry about it. Maybe you want to try doodling for the first time and it's going to look like you're a fifth grader. Who cares? You will be making connections. You will be exercising your brain. Maybe you want to design and make a table. Maybe you want to take up gardening and you're going to figure out the layout for this flower bed in a way that will hopefully be really beautiful that you've chosen yourself. Maybe you just want to bake a recipe that you've never tried before. Or you want to make something without looking up the recipe. Ooh, bold. Anytime we create something, we're really exercising that muscle. We're practicing creating more dots and then connecting them in new ways. So that's a great habit. Anytime in our lives, we don't have to be an artist or a professional creative to be creative people. We already are. Then the last one that's so important as well and often overlooked is to take a step back. Just let it go. If you're really blocked on something, you're probably too close to it. I have this other video on spending time alone, which is one of the creative habits from the video I talked about before, and this other one on practicing mindfulness and sort of making a habit of stillness or meditation, and how these really help unlock our minds and our creativity. Our minds do their best work when they're a little relaxed. Stress kills creativity. So if we're really in a crunch, like at work, we have hard deadlines to meet and we can't get this project to unlock, that might be why. When we are overwhelmed, we can't make the new connections because we're trying too hard to do more important things first. Creativity is a little bit playful. It is. It's always a little bit playful. So maybe we need to leave that project alone for 2 days, or maybe just take a walk. And I think that's part of why oftentimes people come up with some of their best ideas in the shower, is because they're really relaxed and you're not consciously trying super hard to solve the problem. This is the thing with taking a step back. I think sometimes we're afraid to do that because we want to get it done and we need to be productive, but our minds will keep working on the problem. That's why these studies show that oftentimes whatever you think about right before you go to bed, you can wake up and find the answer to it. We don't always have to be putting in a tremendous amount of effort to get a really good outcome. Our brains will keep trying to connect things. They do that. It's very cool. So sometimes we just need to take a step back. And there it is. That's the list. These are broad concepts. Hopefully that allows you to apply them with a little more flexibility in whatever your situation is in life. So again, those were to stay curious and keep asking questions, to deliberately try and change your perspective, to invite some randomness into the situation, to create something and make a habit of pushing yourself to be deliberately a little more creative, and then maybe to take a step back, to take a break, just leave it alone for a while and see what happens. So hopefully those were useful for you. I really enjoy trying to apply them in my life. Look for ways you can push yourself get outside your comfort zone a little bit, learn new skills, be more creative, and just get really involved with life. So thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time.